It all began with the kind of Friday that slips by unnoticed, unremarkable, soft-edged, smothered in the static hum of television light. Emery, Hazel, Ezra, and I lounged in the familiar cocoon of my apartment, marooned among empty soda cans, candy wrappers, and the last fragile embers of comfort. I reached for a bag of chips on the altar of our gluttony, the coffee table, but my disappointment found an empty bag. "I'm going to grab more chips," I muttered, already rising. "Anyone want anything?" "No, I'm good." Hazel spoke for the group. The kitchen was just steps away, but it felt like walking into the mouth of something ancient. As I crossed the threshold, the bag fell from my hands like a dead bird. She was there, rooted in the corner like a dying tree, the woman in black robes facing the wall. No limbs visible, no skin, no hair, no face. Just folds of dark cloth that breathed as if filled with moths. She turned slowly, like time melting around a pivot. I saw nothing, yet I saw everything. A face made of shadows, or perhaps no face at all. Just a suggestion of suffering too unbearable to manifest. I felt the heat of her gaze burning through the fabric. She didn't lunge. She erupted, a collapse of gravity hurtling toward me. My feet failed me as I tried to flee, and my skull cracked against the wall like an egg against stone, and the world ceased to be. When the world returned, it was hollow. My friends looked down at me, their expressions unreadable, concerned, yet cold, like wax statues mimicking empathy. I stood, but they didn't follow with their eyes. They kept staring at the spot where my body had lain, at a pile of black ash. "Guys?" My voice trembled. "What's going on?" I turned, and the kitchen had changed. The walls were no longer paint and plaster, but jagged stone, dripping with cold sweat. Shadows moved in corners, like insects under skin. The living room called to me, humming through the air like blood through veins. I stepped into the living room, unchanged furniture trapped in an ancient tomb. 3 figures stood there. Not my friends. Cloaked, twisted, and obscenely dressed in garbs that forced their bodies into unnatural shapes. One scraped their skull against the stone wall like it was trying to dig out the contents. Another obsessively counted its fingers, over and over, whispering numbers in a language older than speech. The tall one, whose head brushed the ceiling like a spider hiding in the rafters, watched me with invisible eyes. I tried to pass, barely daring to breathe, but the tall one bolted to the door and fled outside. I followed out into a world stripped of all known logic. Stone ground cracked and steaming like the breath of some great underground beast. The sky sagged with thick clouds, the color of clotted blood. My house stood alone in a barren expanse. No neighbors, no trees, only isolation. Cloaked things wandered in the mist. Some walked, some crawled. Some twitched in place like puppets with tangled strings. Their garments masked their faces in uneven measures, as if each was being devoured slowly by their own shame. Then breath, hot, wet, and too close, in my ear. I couldn't move. My limbs belonged to this world. I rolled my eyes sideways and saw it, a face not made, but assembled, too close to mine. Its breath was hunger, its touch, a mimicry of tenderness warped into violation. It stroked my face like a lover made of nightmares. I ran, but it followed, gliding across the stone like a phantom, its legs motionless, its presence relentless. Others noticed. More followed. A chorus of silent dread trailed behind me. The world dimmed with every step until I ran into a dense blackness that swallowed sound. The sound of crowing crept up on me and became louder and louder until it was all I could hear. Louder, shriller, more human than it should be. I screamed, and the dark choked the sound like a jealous lover. I awoke on stone. Light returned like blood, pooling in a fresh corpse. I was standing at the base of stone steps. They led up to 2 stone square pillars that rose up 50 feet and were connected at the top by a horizontal stone beam. The only light was coming from between the pillars. Towering sentinels flanked the archway, garbed in blood and shadow, with helmets fused to their skulls like tumors. A crimson glow formed between the pillars. A hand emerged, massive, blind, groping for me. I dodged. Another hand followed, then more, swiping, grasping, hungering. I backed away in a twisted terror and awe of what I was seeing. Then one caught me and pulled me into the glow. Darkness devoured me. It pressed against my lips, swallowing my screams. Then, movement. 1,000 black feathers tore away from my body, circling. The darkness pulled back, revealing a figure, towering, cloaked in raven plumes that whispered ancient names. A beak jutted from the chaos where its face should be. It floated like a funeral procession through the afterbirth of existence. I didn't know how it happened, but suddenly I was back in my living room, standing behind the couch, watching the TV flicker in the dark. My friends were there, sitting lifelessly on the couch and chair, their faces blank, their eyes locked on the screen. I ran toward them, tears blurring my vision, screaming, "What's going on?" But they didn't react. They didn't even look at me. They all started shaking violently at once, not like a seizure, but something worse, something unnatural. Their bodies stiff and trembling, as if their bones were vibrating against their will. "No! No! What is this?" I cried, reaching for Emery, but the force of his spasms made him impossible to hold. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the shaking stopped. Their faces sagged into an expression of hollow terror. Emery ripped away from me, bolted upright, and sprinted headfirst into the wall. I heard the sickening crack of his neck breaking as he crumpled, convulsing with blackness spilling into his eyes. At the same time, Ezra lashed out at the coffee table, kicking it with wild, furious blows. Her shins split open on impact, blood spraying across the shattered wood. She tore a broken leg from the wreckage and, with frantic strength, beat herself with it until it splintered into a jagged spear, driving it into her own gut again and again until she collapsed. Hazel seized a plate from the wreckage, smashed it into pieces, and without hesitation, began slicing herself, carving deep, ragged wounds across her body with shards clutched in each hand. Blood painted the room as their self-destruction unfolded in a violent, simultaneous nightmare. I couldn't stop, couldn't even move through. I was trapped, frozen, screaming, as I watched my friends die in a blur of crimson and horror. I dropped to my knees, grabbing Hazel, grabbing Ezra, feeling the warmth drain from their bodies as their lives slipped away in my hands. A sound cut through the chaos. Sharp, wet cracks, snaps, the hideous splintering of bones breaking from the inside out. And I looked down in paralyzed terror as their corpses began to twist and contort, their skeletons shattering under invisible forces. Their flesh split into black flakes, peeling away, shredding into the air. The room was a whirlwind of black, a storm swallowing me whole. The flakes blotted out everything, the walls, the floor, my hands, my breath. Until the last thing left was darkness pressing against my skin, pushing into my mouth, my ears, my eyes. When vision returned, I found myself once again before the floating figure, a grotesque silhouette against the smoldering void. "Stop this! Stop! What is this?" I shrieked, my voice cracking under the weight of terror. It said nothing. It only stared, an abyss where a face should be, as I begged and whimpered like an animal about to be slaughtered. Then it drifted closer, silent, inevitable, and its wings unfolded. Black feathers, slick and sharp like shards of obsidian, enveloped me. They coiled around my body, tightening, constricting, until I was locked in a crushing tomb of darkness. The air was gone. My ribs groaned against the pressure. My stomach turned sour and cramped. And then the memories came. They didn't return gently. They ripped through me like rusted hooks. Every cruelty, every betrayal, every act of selfishness I had ever buried and excused burst back into my mind with surgical precision. Each recollection was a barbed spike driving itself into the soft meat of my soul. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," I sobbed, words scraping out of my throat like broken glass. "I tried to be good." The visions twisted themselves into grotesque plays. A childhood friend, his face warping with betrayal. A lover, eyes hollow with abandonment. Strangers reduced to husks by my indifference. Each scene lashed me, tore away strips of who I thought I was, until there was only raw, bleeding guilt left. "No! I didn't mean it!" I shrieked again, but the memories only dug deeper, as if savoring my agony. It wasn't enough to remember. I relived them, over and over, each failure a festering wound. The wings crushed tighter, the black feathers shifting into razored barbs that sliced at my flesh, carving my sins into my skin. There was no refuge, no absolution. There was only the truth, ugly, undeniable, gnawing at the marrow of my existence. A violent explosion of searing red, bile yellow, and blistering orange light tore through my vision, scalding my eyes until all I could see was a weeping, colorless void. As my sight groped back into existence, agony bloomed in my wrists. Chains, coarse and rusted, gnawed into my flesh, grinding against bone. My ankles, too, were shackled, and I dangled like a butchered animal above a churning pit of molten fire. Then the true pain began. The flames licked up at me with a monstrous hunger, their tongues peeling away my skin in wet, hissing strips. My screams erupted raw from my throat, ripping it bloody as I writhed and thrashed, desperate to escape the relentless inferno. My wild swinging drew me closer to the jagged lip of the pit, where unspeakable things waited, creatures stitched together from nightmares, with swollen, twisted limbs and faces that drooled and gnashed with broken human teeth. As I swung within their reach, they clawed at my burning body, talons sinking into exposed muscle, snapping tendons with gleeful savagery. They tore chunks of me away, gnawing at my charred flesh, even as fire devoured what remained. Piece by piece, I was dismantled, shredded, consumed, until there was nothing left but ash and the memory of agony. I opened my eyes. I was shackled once more, flesh raw and whole but trembling, suspended over the ravenous fire. The inferno rose again, searing my skin anew. I jerked and swung helplessly, straight into the waiting maws of the creatures, who shredded and devoured me again and again and again. There was no end. All around me, the air throbbed with the chorus of other souls, a symphony of endless torment, each scream folding into the next, an ocean of despair from which there was no escape, each being punished for their disobedience.
I took the job for the money. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Stay overnight with an elderly woman in her home, make sure she didn't wander or fall, call her daughter if anything serious happened. They told me she had dementia, mostly harmless, sometimes confused and forgetful. She just needed someone there, just in case. When I first met her, she was lovely. A tiny, bird-like woman with thin gray hair and eyes that twinkled when she remembered who I was. "You're the nice young man," she said the first evening I arrived. "The one who keeps me from getting lost." "That's me," I smiled. She laughed like a little girl for a moment, then furrowed her brow. "But, remind me, what's your name again?" "Ben," I told her. "Of course, Ben." She patted my hand. "You look like a Benjamin." That night was quiet. After she went to bed, I stretched out on the living room couch with a blanket and actually slept better than I had in weeks. The house was old but comfortable. The shelves were filled with books, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, some in languages I didn't recognize. Odd, but I barely paid attention. The second and third nights were the same. She'd greet me kindly, sometimes mistaking me for her son, sometimes thinking I was her brother. She always apologized when she realized, her cheeks pink. I assured her it didn't bother me. After tea, she would shuffle off to bed, and I would sleep peacefully until dawn. It was almost too easy. On the fourth night, I woke up to a sound. Not loud, just wrong. A faint creak of the floorboards, followed by the scrape of wood against wood. I sat up, listening. The house groaned in the wind, but the sound had been too deliberate. I went to check on her. She was asleep, mouth open, breath rattling gently. I watched her for a moment, waiting for her chest to rise again. When it did, I exhaled in relief. Back in the living room, I laughed at myself. Old houses always make noises. The next night, the noises returned, a shuffle, a mutter. I held my breath listening. This time, I was sure it wasn't the house. When I checked her room, she was again sound asleep. Still, I didn't sleep well. A week in, I saw her. She was in the hallway, her nightgown trailing on the floor, whispering to herself. The words made no sense, some soft, some harsh, tumbling over one another too quickly to follow. It might have been another language. It might have been nonsense. "Mrs. Harlow," I whispered, stepping toward her. "It's me, Ben." She turned her head slowly, eyes glassy and unfocused. She looked right through me. For a moment I thought she might fall, but she steadied herself, whispered a final phrase I couldn't catch, and shuffled back to bed. By morning, she was her sweet self again. "Ben, you must be tired," she said at breakfast. "I wander at night, don't I?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But that's why I'm here." She smiled, embarrassed. "You're too kind." The nights grew worse. She began noticing me during her wanderings. She would stop mid-whisper and glare, her lips curling into something hateful. "Thief!" she hissed one night. Her eyes were filled with anger then, and suddenly they turned to fear. "Don't hurt me." She turned around and seemed to forget that I was there, and she went back to bed. The next night I was awoken from my sleep by her sharp word, "Liar!" I opened my eyes to see her in the hallway, glaring at me. She didn't say anything else. She just stood there glaring at me, unblinking. "What's the matter, Mrs. Harlow?" I tried to comfort her and guide her back to bed. She walked with me back, but her eyes never left my face. "Intruder!" She called me the following night. Then she went back to her room. I was never sure if she was sleepwalking or if she was awake, or if it was her dementia that had her confused. I would understand if she were confused and angry. I would be too if I woke up. And there was a strange man sleeping in my living room. Something inside me made me feel like she was awake, and maybe not even confused. I told myself it was the disease. She didn't mean it, but her eyes said otherwise. By the 10th night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her muttering. Sometimes the words seeped into my dreams. Sometimes I woke up to find her standing in the hallway, staring into the darkness. Once, I thought she was at the foot of my couch, but when I blinked, she was gone. That night, restless and uneasy, I wandered into her study. The shelves were heavy with books, some I recognized, old novels, biographies, but many were bound in cracked leather, written in symbols that made my skin crawl. There were journals, too, filled with neat, spidery handwriting. I couldn't read most of it, but the diagrams and strange circles told me enough. Photographs lined the shelves. Mrs. Harlow in her youth stood tall and full of life. It was nice to see her with clarity in her eyes. There is so much she has lived through that I would like to know, but I am too late for that. As I was going through the books, I found an old photo book. I flipped through it and found pictures I wished I had never seen. They were of her with other women, in the center of a ring of fire. She was staring at the camera with that glare she gave me at night. Picture after picture of her wearing robes, in the middle of rituals, just staring at the camera with such anger. It was like she was looking into the future, disapproving of the day I would someday be looking through her books. I realized then she hadn't just been some sweet old woman in her younger years. She had been something else. In the center of the study was a round table piled high with books, trinkets, and old letters. I had seen the table several times, but I had never really taken a close look at it. There was a spot on it that was not covered. Just a few inches of bare wood table. There was something on it. Weird lines. I started removing the things that covered it and slowly started to see what the table was. The lines made a pentagram with crescent moons on either side. After noticing this, I realized that the books were not old fiction books, but grimoires and rune books. I picked one up and thumbed through it. All the symbols seemed to leak into me, and the air felt heavy. I could almost feel the air breathing into my skin. Cold, wet breath. I felt eyes on me. "Benjamin." Her voice cut through the silence. I turned. She stood in the doorway, fully awake. No confusion in her eyes now, no cloud of dementia, just sharp, furious clarity. You shouldn't have touched my things. I. I'm sorry, I stammered. I didn't mean. Her hands rose, the air thickened. She spoke, not the garbled mutters of before, but clear, commanding words that shook the walls around me. The symbols in the book seemed to glow, while the photographs shifted and watched. The floor tilted beneath me. The hallway behind her stretched on, longer and longer, its doors bending and twisting. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head, and her voice grew louder and full of command. She was speaking clearly, but I could not understand a word she was saying. It seemed like another language. I stumbled, clutching at the wall. The house was changing. The doorways no longer led where they should. Every step carried me deeper into corridors that shouldn't exist. Her laughter followed me. One room leading straight into another room. Into another room. None of them were rooms that I recognized. Halls and walls, and rooms of gloom. Windows filled with black, and memories of past days. I was there, then here, and where? Time traveled in and out, forward and backward. Where am I? Who am I? How long have I been here? A minute? An hour? A week? Forever. The old lady sits on the edge of her bed, brushing her long gray hair, laughing at her thoughts. A moment of clarity to reflect on the amusements of her past.
We are dust drifting endlessly on the breath of an uncaring wind. We are grains of sand scattered across a shore where the waves do not remember yesterday. A flicker, barely a flame, in a fire too vast for our warmth to matter. Life is not even a moment. It is a tremor in silence, a sigh lost in the void. Here and then, never again. To be human is to be useful. To be loved is to be needed. Women are reduced to mirrors of desire, objects painted with lust and longing, men sculpted into walls and wallets, guardians of safety rather than souls. The better we wear these masks, the more the world adores us. But masks rot, and when they do, so do the affections that came with them. Every connection is a silent agreement. What can you do for me? When the ledger runs dry, the bond phrase, you are discarded like a letter never read again. The tragedy of our time is not betrayal, but indifference. Love, true love, is not a fairy tale. It is a quiet contract, and like all contracts, it expires. 4 generations from now, your name will vanish. No one will mouth it, not even in passing. You will be no more than a faded photograph, or worse, just a blank space in the family tree. You will become a stranger to those you once hoped to be remembered by. Even the most noble among us are not safe from the teeth of time. History chews and distorts, twisting the pure into caricature. Heroes become monsters in the retelling. Memory is a liar, and legacy is a gamble. The things that keep you up at night, the panic, the fear, the aching loneliness, are invisible to everyone else. And if no one cares today, who will care a century from now? You will vanish. So will your triumphs and your failures. Dust again. At best, you might build something that survives you, but even that can be demolished by a stranger's whim. One decision, one new regime, one erased file, and the dream dies not with a bang, but with a shrug. They say the universe is 13.7 billion years old, perhaps more, but no one truly knows. We reach for truth, but truth slips between our fingers like water. What is fact today will be myth tomorrow. What we believe now will be mocked or mourned. Reality is rewritten by those who shout the loudest. Morality swings like a pendulum, never settling. Right becomes wrong. Evil wears a smiling face. And when the pendulum swings toward darkness, most will cheer, mistaking shadow for light. Who are we to define good and evil when even gods fall to reinterpretation? Life is not a golden light, but a tar that clings to your skin and bones till you fade away. It's not a ladder you climb or a road you walk. It is a pit, a great black pit of tar, thick and choking. It sticks to your spirit and pulls you downward with each breath. There are no ropes to grab, no ladders lowered, just moments, Small, bright sprinkles, falling gently onto the surface. Flecks of color on an ocean of black. Fleeting, fragile, but they shimmer. These sprinkles are joy, a laugh, a touch, a memory that lingers like music long after the song ends. And your happiness, such as it is, comes not from escaping the tar, but from how deeply you can treasure these glimmers while everything else tries to consume you. No one is free from it. Not the powerful, not the wealthy, not the adored. Tar coats us all. Yours may smell sweeter. Mine may be thicker. But pain knows no hierarchy. Grief speaks every language. Hope is the only light that burns in this darkness, and faith, whatever yours may be, is the wick. Without them, the sprinkles blur, but if you hold on to them, they shine. Think of a time you thought would break you. How is it now that the pain feels vague, but the joys are clear? That is how memory softens. Time fades the dark and polishes the light. These sprinkles, those little specks of grace, are what life is for. Not legacy, not permanence, not being known after you're gone, but this moment, and this one, and this one. They are yours, unrepeatable, unshareable, and in the end, they are all that remain. Hold them close, wrap your soul around them, because they are not just what you have, they are what you are.